Challenges facing the government in reducing temporary resident levels, pressures on institutions based on the lack of investment from students, more changes to the student program, and more topical information on this edition of ImmPulse.
I'm Howard Greenberg.
Hi, I'm Hameed.
Nomad, today is an interesting impulse for discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about temporary resident numbers in Canada. The newspapers have their views. We're going to talk a little bit about study permits, strategies. We have our views. What are the initial thoughts that come to mind?
Well, a really interesting article in the Globe looking at Canada's objective. We've heard reduce temporary residents to 5% to deal with housing and infrastructure. Based on the analyst's projection, we'll only get there at this pace in 2029. So it seems like the strategy is not going to work.
Yeah, I think it sounds pretty good, and it seems to meet the critics' concerns about housing, but a lot of people are here with status, and that status is going to continue until it either expires or it's terminated.
Right.
And that's going to take some time.
And there's been a lot of related consequences. So although there's some potential reduction in certain categories, we see that the Ontario universities are quite concerned because of the lack of investment from foreign students that they're not getting. They're not able to provide enough services for domestic students. We also see a concern in another article that of the available study permits, 50% are in fact going to students who are already here.
Meaning they're students who are in existing courses and they may want to increase their education, take more courses or advance their degrees, so they're not leaving.
Everything's related. Lower immigration levels, much tougher to get permanent residence. Foreign students may have come to Canada, completed their degree, have worked, still not successful in achieving permanent residence. So what do? If they're not going to go home, which is what the first article suggested, they're not going home, then they may study further.
And every dependent child who's in high school, dependent on a work permit holder, is going to need a study permit to go to university. And there are a number of those students.
So you can imagine the complexity for the government in trying to figure out the right policy with all of these moving parts happening at once.
So I guess the real consideration is how strategic the prospective student has to be in their home country. What do they have to think about when they put pen to paper, so to speak, and figure out where they're going to go to school?
Right. Well, and so we know as of last week and further updates, if you're not going to a university program, there's more directives in terms of what programs allow you to get a postgraduate work permit. So if you're intending to study, you need to make sure that if you are planning to get a work permit, your program's eligible, number one. Number two, we see that the financial requirement for settlement funds has increased. So you should be reviewing that. Depending on the size of your family, that will vary as well. We see a lot of refusals of study permits, and we have less available spots for foreign students. So making sure, and we've got a whole history in our ImmPulse of cases on students, that your applications are clear, it's realistic in terms of your type of study that you intend to do,
right,
lines up with your experience,
right?
All of those things have to be considered. And then to the earlier point, are you looking to achieve permanent residence? You should understand whether your school will position you for postgrad work permit, Canadian experience points, or do you have to pivot to a provincial program?
Right. Well, I think that's today's topic. There's a lot of strategy involved in study permits, and you really have to think about it on day one, even before day one, because your course of strategy as to what you're going to do will be determined by where you want to go to school and what course you want to study.
Right. And we can anticipate, I think, continued change going forward. So you have to stay up to date on all of these trends.
I'll give you a little preview for next week's video. We're going to talk about provincial nominee programs and how they could be the answer for coming to Canada permanently. And the special programs by the federal government, the northern settlement programs, which there's a number of in different provinces and cities, and they're not well understood, but they are a very interesting way of successfully immigrating to Canada.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining this episode. If you have any questions about study permits, eligibility, given the changes, please reach out to Greenberg Hameed. We'd be pleased to assist.
If you find that after you've reached out to Nolan, he hasn't answered any of your questions properly, feel free to contact me personally, and I will deal with any issues arising from Nolan's advice.
If you end up reaching out to Howard Greenberg and he falls asleep on the phone, please call me and I'll answer the questions that you didn't get from Howard.
Not likely to happen. I don't use a phone. I put everything in writing.
That's a problem for you.
Well,
What kind of lawyer are you?
we charge by the word.
Cut.